Hi, welcome to video 3. In this video, I'm going to go through the design process and build the coffee table so you get a feel for what it's like. Let's get started. So first of all, you can see I'm back to the what the screen looks like at startup. So I'm going to go ahead and select this and delete that. Next step is going to be to put down some guidelines or snap lines so that we can start to build the legs of the table. I'm going to try to build this from the bottom up, meaning starting with the legs and then going up. So first of all, let's put the snap lines down. I'm going to start here with the tape measure on the green axis and left click. And this time I'm going to set it at 36 inches or 3 feet. So just type in 36 and enter. And then I'll do the same for the red axes here. Okay, so this is going to make the footprint of the coffee table. So let's get started by putting down an individual table leg. So if you know a little bit about wood, then you'll know that, for example, a 4x4 is not actually 4 inches by 4 inches. It's actually closer to 3.5 by 3.5 inches. So I'm going to think of this as using a 4x4 for the legs. However, I'm going to set it at 3.5 by 3.5, and it's really important when you're designing to try to get as close as you can to the real measurements of the material that you're going to be using. So let me double check that. 3.5, 3.5. Okay, so let's put a rectangle down. And now let's pull this up, let's say 12 inches. Okay. So now that we have this design, let's go ahead and make it into a component. And we will call it 4 by 4 by 12. Again, if we have to go back and edit this, all you need to do is double click on the part, and we can go back in and select individual faces. We can push pull, we can scale, whatever we need to do. And when we're done, we can either click outside of it or hit the escape key. So now let's continue on. I can get rid of these guidelines because I no longer need them. Now, to duplicate this table leg, similar to what we did before, I'm going to use the move tool here. So after selecting the component with a left click, I'm going to select this point here and start to move it, and then hit the control key to create a copy. And I'm going to snap that point to this intersection here. And then I'm just going to repeat that process to put 4 table legs down. Okay, for some reason it's not snapping to the green axes here. So in this case, what you can do is go to a point that you know it will snap to, in this case the origin, place it, and then pick up that point again and come down. Okay, so now we have the 4 table legs in place. Let's go ahead and begin to build our first the bottom of the top section here. Now, how I imagine this being built is out of boards of wood. We could use something like a piece of plywood here as well and just simply measure out a rectangle. But in this case, I'm going to imagine that we're using 1 by 6 inch wood boards. So what I'm actually going to do is offset lines using our table legs as reference, and I'm going to offset it 0.75 inches on each side. You'll see why I do that in a second here, but basically I'm leaving some room so that we can come back in and put boards, the other boards that will fill up that gap. Okay, so now for my first board, I'm going to take this line and create another snap line that will define our first board. So again, if you were to Google actual wood sizes, one of the first entries that comes up is a handy table that will tell you the actual wood dimensions. So if we're going to use, let's say, a 1x6 board here, it'll tell you that it actually measures 0.75 inches by 5.5 inches. So let's come this way, 5.5 inches. So I'll just type 5.5, enter. And this is going to be our first board here. Again, we know it's 0.75, not 1 inches. So again, make sure you have that in mind. And that's why I offset this 0.75 again, to account for the thickness of additional boards going down. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn this into a component now before we go any further and lose track of things. So I'm going to clear out as much as I can out of the way to make it easy to select. And similar to before, I'm going to go ahead and select these two. To select multiple items, you can hold the control key down and left click. And you can also hold the control key down. I thought you could. I'm sorry. Actually, if you hold the shift key down, it will let you deselect as well. So I'm going to right click on those and we're going to do the hide. Now I can select this by itself and I'll right click and make component. Before I do that though, let's go ahead and measure the length so we know what that is. So again, there to do that measurement, now I'm just snapping to one corner, carrying it all the way down to the other, and it tells me it's 34.5 inches long. So now when we come in and right click make component, we know this is a 1x6 by 34.5 inches, and we can just call this a board. And I'm just going to double check that. Right, okay. Okay, so now that we have that, we can unhide those components, unhide all. Now what we can do is just start to copy this, or just make copies of it, similar to what we did for the table legs. So I'm going to need another snap line down here. I know I just erased it. Let's put that back in. 0.75, enter. Okay, so now let's go ahead and grab this corner here and hit control, and we're going to line it up here. And now similarly, I'll grab this corner here and control and line it up there. And let's grab this and control and line it up there. And let's just repeat the process. We'll see how many we can fit in here. Okay, perfect. So for this, we'll have to create a separate board, which is no big deal. We'll take the rectangle, start here, and move down here. And we'll pull that up to this surface. Notice that it's snapping to this surface. So if I have this on a face or a line or a point, anything on here, it will automatically pull it to that so that it's even with that surface. Now again, we have to pause here and create a component out of this piece that we just made. It's easy to keep going and forget about that. So if you find that you're making that mistake, you're definitely not alone. I do it all the time still. So let's select this and make component. Actually, let's measure it first. 1.5 inches, which would actually be a 1x2 inch board. So that's actually really nice. It turns into a standard board for us. I think what I meant to say is I planned it like that. So okay, so 1x2 by 34.5 and create. Perfect. Now we'll edit, unhide all, and there we go. So the way I imagine these coming together, if you've ever worked with wood, maybe you haven't, is this would be something you would build beforehand, and you would glue these boards together and likely also use little pegs, drill holes, and add pegs. And actually, we can go ahead and add that in here as well. Let's hide one of these. And again, all we need to do for that is just make some measurements. So let's say we come this way 1 inch, and we'll come down to the midpoint here. Notice how it's snapping to the midpoint, which is really convenient. And we'll come in, oh, think I got it. Let's try that again. There we go, 1 inch. Okay, so let's use our circle tool here. And again, it's automatically aligning to be perpendicular to that surface, which is exactly what we want. So, okay, so radius, we want it to be, let's do 0.125, so that way the diameter is 1/4 inch. And then let's pull that. Okay, so this one's being a little bit tricky for us here. Let's see if we can. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start moving it in, and I'm going to just type in, let's say 1 inch. Now it created it, but it's being a little bit difficult, so, or maybe it didn't. That's why, because I'm trying to edit it and it's not. I'm trying to edit it in assembly mode. To add the hole, I actually need to edit the individual component. So again, to do that, we double click on it, and notice we lost our guidelines because those are in the assembly. So, you know, like I said, even I still get tricked up on some of this stuff. It definitely takes practice, but the main point is to understand what's going on. So let's do that again. Let's come in 1 inch and down to the midpoint. There we go. 1 inch. Now when we make our holes, 0.125. Now when we make our holes, you can see now it's actually taking away the material. So let's go 1 inch. And now we have a hole. One little tip here. When you're editing individual components, you can actually hide surfaces, similar to what we're doing with hiding components. You can hide surfaces, so if you left click and then hide, you can kind of get an interior view of what's going on in the part. And this can really help you if you run into problems or something's not looking right. It often helps to hide surfaces and get an idea of what's going on. And then again, to unhide, you would just edit, unhide all, and there you go. Excuse me. But again, if we were to hide this and then exit the component mode, doing the edit, unhide all now, it will not bring that surface back because we're back in the assembly. So to do that, you have to access the component and then do the command. So another thing to note while we're doing this, let's finish this hole as well. So 0.125, and now pull 1. Okay, and let's get rid of the guides. So another thing to note, which is handy about this, is it's putting these holes in each component. So you don't have to do this for every one. You can just edit one of the components and it updates every single one of them, which is pretty convenient. So that would be an example of including a hole that we could put pegs in. And the thought process is you do it on the other board as well on the matching side, so that way you can insert pegs to align the boards. It's a pretty common practice in woodworking. It just helps them stay together better. But I just want to illustrate that you can go ahead and add all those features in, and then later I'll show you how you can even add dimensions and create work instructions so that when you're going to build the parts, you have everything that you need right in front of you. So you can do everything in one batch. You can cut all your pieces at one time. You can drill all your holes at one time, so that way it saves you time because you're not switching between tools, picking things up, putting them down. So it just helps the process go a lot faster, which is a really, really useful. It's why a tool like this is so useful. And I know, people might say, well, I can just do this on paper, faster than I could on the computer. But, there's some advantages of the computer as well in terms of updating everything at once and So if you take the time to learn, it really pays off in the end. But enough about that. Let's continue on here. So I'm going to get rid of all my snap lines or guidelines. Now I'm going to build the side pieces here. I'm going to imagine that, excuse me, let's say that this is going to be the front over here. So what I'm going to do is I'll create a rectangle here. Okay, I thought it might let me snap. It's not letting me, so I'm going to create a line here. And now we should be able to put it in. Yep. And again, let's assume this is another 1/6, so we'll pull it up 5.5. There we go. And get rid of that. Now we need to make this a component. So let's hide all these. So another trick here is when you're using the box, the pointer and the box to select, if you click and hold and drag from left or right, it will only select things that are fully enclosed by the box. But if you go the opposite direction, left click and go from right to left, anything that the box touches, it will select it. So just a kind of a quick tip there can help you out depending on what you're trying to do. So let's hide all of those and hide that and hide that. Now we'll select this. Again, let's get a measurement first. Okay, so 34.5. So we know that this is the same dimension as the other boards that we've already created. So let's go ahead and delete that. And you really want to take advantage of this because at the end I'll show you another trick that allows us to see the bill of materials. So you want to reuse your components as much as possible because it's keeping track of how many you're using. So at the end it'll summarize all the components that you have, and you don't want duplicates because it'll just make things confusing for you. But we'll get to that later. So let's go ahead and use our copy trick again. Let's select and then move and then copy. So for now we can just move it out into space because we need to rotate it into the right orientation. So now let's do our rotate tool here. And again, we want to rotate it perpendicular to the green axis, so that's actually good. Let's left click there. And now for the reference, let's come straight out and left click again, and then let's move it up until we get to the 90-degree mark there. So perfect. Now all we need to do is rotate it again, and we want it blue, and then left click, and then again turn it 90 degrees. So now we know it's in the right orientation. We can use the move tool, select this corner, and let's place it right there. Perfect. Okay, so now we have that into place. Let's go ahead and move that to the other side. Perfect. Okay, so now we need to create the front and back pieces, and let's get a measurement on this because I don't think it's going to be, I think it's going to be too long. Yeah, 36 inches. So we'll need a new piece here. Let's grab our rectangle tool and left click, and then left click again. And let's pull that up. Now we can just select this surface or line to pull it up so that it's even. Okay, so again, let's make that a component. And let's call this 1/6 by 36. And let's double check that. Yep. Unhide all. Unhide all. Okay, so now let's move this one to the front, or copy to the front. Okay, there we go. Now let's, excuse me, now let's create the tabletop itself. So we know this is 36 inches. Let's plan on having a 4-inch overhang on each side. So that would be 8 inches which would put us at 44 inches total. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to build guidelines here. And we know we want to move in the green direction here. So let's do 4 inches, type 4 and enter. Likewise here. Oh. Click, and then we're in the red direction now, and 4 and enter. And now here in the green, 4 enter. And then finally here, 4 enter. Okay. So let's plan on using 1x6s again just to keep things consistent. So rectangle, we'll start, actually we need to put down another guideline here. Let's start here and go 5.5 and enter. And now we'll start there and go to there. And then let's bring this up 0.75. Okay. So again, let's hide our components here. Okay, now we can select that. Make component 1x6 by 44 and tabletop. Let's just double check that. Yep, 44. Edit, unhide all. Okay. Now let's move this to the other side. Again, we're left clicking and then tapping the control key, pressing it and letting it go to create the copy. And then we'll go to the intersection, left click again, and then just repeat the process. So left click, control, and then left click. Left click, control, and then snap it to that one. And left click, control, snap it to that one. Left click, control. Okay, let's see what we can do here. I think we have a perfect fit. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's check that. Yep, so we have 8 boards times 5.5 inches gives us 44 inches exactly. So we have a perfect fit. Again, just like I planned. Not really. Okay. So there you go. That is a basic coffee table. Now we can continue. We can add some, if you wanted, you could add a separate shelf on the bottom here, or even just some trim pieces. So for example, if we came in and snapped to the midpoint there, let's say we want to put in a 1 by 1 bar, or let's say a 2 by 2 square bar down here. So what we could do is do that, and then we could come up, let's say 2 inches, and then we'll move over here 0.75. So a 2 by 2 bar measures 1.5 by 1.5. So we want to take half that, and you'll see what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to create a perfect square here so that I can use our rectangle tool easily. So what I did was I defined the center point, and then I just did 0.75, 0.75, and then 0.75 and 0.75, so that way the total dimension is 1.5 and then 1.5. So now we can easily use the rectangle tool. And that's really what you want to do. Really take advantage of these guidelines so that your designs are exact. But now we can just pull it over to the surface, and again it's snapping to that. So there we go. Now we can come back in, delete our guidelines. Let's hide these. Oh. Let's get a measurement here. 29. 2 by 2. by 29. Let's say, I don't know, trim piece. Sure, or bar, trim bar, whatever. Okay. So to move this over, we could create the snap lines again. I'm going to see if I can do it very carefully to avoid doing that, save me a little bit of time. So left click here. Now I'm going to just come straight out on the green axes so I know I'm not going any higher or lower. And let's rotate. Okay, so see, sometimes it can be hard. It wants to snap to a different surface, and this is where the shift key really comes in handy. So get it started on the surface that you want, hold the shift, and now snap to the point, and it will keep that orientation. So let's do the green axis here and then rotate 90. Okay, so I think I am going to have to put some snap lines down here. So we'll come to the middle and then 0.75. Let's just come up as well, 2, I believe we said, and then 0.75. Okay, that should be good enough to do this corner. There we go. Perfect. And now we'll erase those. Okay, so for this, it's the middle. So for this, what I'm going to do is select this component, move, control. Now I should be able to move it along the green axis. If you hold the shift, notice it will lock, it will snap to that axis. So I'm going to try to take advantage of that here. Hold the shift and then put it on this line there. And now I know that that's exactly where I want it. And then let's do the same for the last piece here. Oops, Control Z. Okay, so that looks pretty nice. So let's say we wanted to take this board and make a hole for a drawer. Well, we have a few problems with that. First, let's hide these top pieces here. Select, right click, and hide. If you remember, this component and this component are the same right now. And if we were to put a hole into this one, it would also put a hole into this one. So what we would have to do would be to delete this one and create a new piece and then put a hole in it for that. I'm not going to do that at this time. I think at this point you should be able to figure that out yourself. So I do want to end the video with a few of the things that I mentioned before. So first of all, if you'll come up here to Window, the Window menu, and left click on the Window menu, you'll see some options here, but the one that we want right now is called Model Info. If you left click on that, it has a couple of different things you can choose here, but what we really want is the statistics right there. And if you change this drop down, it might be on entire model, change it to only components. And you can see here, it's telling us exactly which components we have and the quantity. So it's really important, this is why it's really important to have good descriptions on our components, because if you were to put this into a spreadsheet or a different document now, you have everything that you need to start detailing out your grocery list for supplies. You know, for example, I know that I have a 4x4 here. It's 12 inches long and I have 4 of them. So if you do the math, that's 48 inches worth of 4x4. So that means I can buy one 8-foot length, which is a standard length of 4x4. So on your grocery list, you could say, okay, one 4x4, and you know you've got that covered. Similar with the 1x6s. You can start to break it down again. You know, if you want an 8-foot length, that's 96 inches. So you know that, you know, these two together, that gives you 72 inches. That's probably one board. 44 inches, and there's 8 of them, so that's, you know, probably 3 or 4 boards or something. But you know, and you can do the same for these. There's 8. But I just hope that you're picking that up, because that makes it really nice. You know, you'll know exactly what you need to buy, and you won't, you know, it reduces the chance that you buy too little wood and have to go back to the store. So that's a really nice feature there. And again, we get there by doing the window, model info, statistics, and then only components. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is developing what I call kind of basic work instructions. So we kind of went through this already. Let's take a look at, I want to take a look at these table legs here. Let's say we wanted to include pins in the top of the table leg and in this board assembly here to help align things and keep it bonded better structural strength. So what we can do is, again, add holes here. We can snap to the midpoints here. Add a hole. Oh, I'm making the same mistake. We got to go into the component. There we go. So double click on that. And let's start over. Snap to the midpoint. Okay. Now hole and then 0.125 to give us a 1/4 inch diameter hole. And then let's pull that down. Let's say 1/2 inch. 0.5, enter. Okay. And we'll get rid of those. Okay, so now we know that we have a hole there. Let's hide these again. So now let's see if we can take advantage of hiding these surfaces. So let's double click on this. Let's left click the top and hide it. Let's also click the bottom and hide that as well. And then click outside or hit the escape key. So now we can see exactly where our hole is. Now let's take some measurements from the center here out to the side. We know that's 1 inch. Now come this way, also 1 inch. Okay, so now double click on your component again and let's do edit, unhide. Now let's go to the bottom, make our guidelines 1 and 1. Let's put a hole, 0.125, enter, and now let's come up 0.5. Okay, and now we have a hole that should be exactly lined up with the table leg. Let's check that. Select the top surface with a left click and then hide. And let's go ahead and hide the shaft here, left click and hide. We can still see where the hole is here, and it should line up perfectly. So let's click outside to bring everything back. And there you can kind of see that they exactly match, one on top of the other. Let's double click that, edit, unhide all. Okay, so, and then again you'll notice it did it to every single one, so we're saving a ton of time there. And then likewise with the boards. So in this case, it's actually kind of a bad thing because we may not want to drill holes in all of these. So when you're building, you can either just disregard these, or you can turn these pieces into separate individual components and then put the holes in them. Whichever you think is, if it was me, I would probably just keep them the same and then disregard these holes. But if you wanted to do it by the book, then I'd probably just make them into new components. But the real beauty here for this is when you go to create a set of work instructions. So here's what I mean by that. Now that we're all done with our build, we can go through and we can start to save components. And I'd recommend saving the ones that have the holes in them and the individual features, and here's why. So to do that, first you left click and then right click and then save as. Now that'll bring up a window, and I'll show you this in a second as soon as I can find my folder. Okay, so it'll bring up a folder. Again, it'll keep the same name as the component name. So go ahead and save that. Now what we can do is we can open it, and bear with me here, I'll find that folder again. Okay, so now go to the folder and open that. Oh, first of all, yes, we definitely do want to save this. Let's say coffee table. That's another good point here. Make sure you're saving frequently, just in case something happens. And I think I'll mention now while I'm doing this revisions, you may want to consider adding revisions to your design. And what that means is, for example, I would call this revision A or Rev A. And why that's beneficial is if this was a design that I wasn't exactly sure that I was in love with it, I can call this revision A. Now if I wanted to continue making changes, I can do that. And if I end up hating the changes, I don't have to undo them. I can simply go back and open up that file. Or for example, I can make the changes and then save it as Rev B or a different name, revision B. And now I have both of them to quickly pull up. So later, if I want to come back and compare the two, I can easily do that. Whereas if it was just one file name, it would overwrite every time I was saving it, and you can't easily go back and forth that way. So consider adding revisions to all your parts. It's just good practice. So now let's go ahead and open up our table leg. Okay, so pretty basic here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use this dimension tool. Just left click it. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just pick one point that you want to start at and another point that you want to measure between, and left click. So left click one, left click the other, and now you'll notice it's giving us a dimension of 12 inches, which is perfect. You can do the same thing for the hole. If the hole center doesn't appear right away, move your mouse along the circumference and then move towards the middle, and it should recognize it. So we're going to start at the center, and we're going to snap this way to that line there. Perfect. We're going to left click again, and now we're going to drag this out so we can see it. And then likewise, we're going to do the same thing. Left click, and then left click here, and drag that out to where we can see it. That's a little messy. You can use your pointer tool, or we may have to use the move tool. Yep, you can use the move tool here to get it into a better location. So one last dimension. Let's come here and do the middle to the outer edge here. Trying to see, there's a way to move the 0.125. I don't remember how to do that, but anyway, get them into a point where you can see them all or have an idea. And there's a couple things you can do. So there's a couple things we can do here to get this into a format where we can take it out to the shop and start working on it. First of all, you can do File, Print, and instead of selecting a printer, you can select Adobe PDF, and then just click OK, It's going to ask you where to save it. You could just use the same folder that you saved your models in. And then what it's going to do is it's going to create a PDF document that shows you the exact picture. So now you can take this out to the shop and you have a quick reference sheet of exactly what you need to do to build this leg, including all the holes and all the other features that you want to dimension on. This table leg's pretty simple, but if you had, you know, some different cuts that you wanted to do, you could easily add those in and dimension them in the same manner, and then take it out to the shop and kind of just check it off as you go. And you can do the same thing for every part that you have. Another way you may want to do it is if you're on a Windows machine or a Mac that has a screen capture tool. You can also use that just to bring it up and do a quick capture there. And then you can just copy paste that onto a different document, like a Word document, or that way you can just put multiple pictures on one Word doc and print the whole thing off. Might save you a little bit of time, but either way should work. And again, so the big advantage here is when you go to do your building, you should have instructions for every single piece that you need to build. And I've had really good success with this. I built a table very similar to this one, and even in sticking with even with doing the dimensions and measuring everything out and cutting the table, all the holes and the pegs, everything lined up absolutely perfectly, like you would expect it to. So it does a really good job, and it'll really save you time. So so that's it. That's all for this video. If there's anything that was that I went through too fast or that you have questions on, please feel free to reach out to me. You can either comment on this post, or you can always reach me at jason@engineeringforbeginners.com. So let me know how it goes. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.